between eruptions, or its interval, is dependent upon a number of factors. In 1938, ranger naturalist Harry Woodward made an important discovery. He found that there was a relationship between the duration, or how long an eruption lasts, and the length of time between eruptions of Old Faithful. A short duration means less water and heat has been discharged, and a shorter interval will occur. If the duration is long, then more time will be required for the geyser to recharge itself. Another factor that determines a geyser's predictability is known as exchange of function. Almost all geysers are associated with others in closely related groups through plumbing systems that are interconnected. It is this sharing of plumbing systems that makes many of the geysers difficult, if not impossible, to predict. An eruption of one member of a group can have a profound effect on others, stealing needed heat or water. Grotto geyser is closely related with at least 6 others. Grotto's present frequency has also acted as a pressure release to Giant geyser, rendering it inactive. Prior to an eruption of Grotto, a closely related geyser known as North Grotto Fountain may erupt. In the foreground is Spa geyser, another member of the Grotto geyser complex. Its pool will fill during an eruption of Grotto, and sudden bursts of water are common. Larger eruptions of Spa have been known to visibly weaken Grotto. Still, other geysers can be used as an indicator for the prediction of another. This small spouter is known as beehive indicator. People are fascinated with its tiny eruptions, unaware that it's often a prelude to a much larger eruption from the cone to the left. Within 20 minutes of the indicator, a full eruption of beehive may begin. Visitors are often caught off guard by beehives' infrequent outbursts. Some indicators are more subtle than beehives. 1.5 to 2 hours before an eruption, Riverside Geyser's pool will begin to gently overflow, spilling into the Firehole River. Riverside is one of the most regular geysers in Yellowstone, with an average interval of around 7 hours. A column of water arches over the Firehole River at heights of 75 feet. If any geyser in the upper basin is worth waiting for, it is Grand. Grand is a fountain-type geyser and is the largest predictable geyser in the world. Grand begins with a long series of powerful bursts that can last several minutes. During this opening performance, explosive bursts can reach heights of 150 feet. But the best is yet to come. Suddenly, the eruption stops. The column of water again begins to rise. This and any succeeding bursts may reach heights of 200 feet or more. For visitors that witness these incredible eruptions, it's an experience they'll not soon forget. Nearby Sawmill is related to Grand and is also a fountain geyser, erupting from a pool of water and characterized by the splashing action of its eruptions. Lion, on the other hand, is a cone-type geyser. Cone types erupt from a small opening that acts much like a nozzle. During an active period, Lion erupts every 1 to 3 hours with a majestic plume. geyserite cone suggests that it's very old, requiring thousands of years to build this 17-foot-high cone. Castle's eruption pattern has changed considerably over the years and currently erupts every 10 to 12 hours. Plume Geyser has also undergone changes over the years. Plume was created in 1922 when a small steam explosion created its surface vent. In December of 1972, another steam explosion opened a new, larger vent. Eruptions occur about every half hour and are in a series of 4 to 5 bursts reaching heights of 35 feet. Daisy's eruptions typically occur every 85 to 110 minutes. Its eruptions and intervals are often affected by cooling winds or strong weather fronts. Visitors are mesmerized by its angled plume. The abundance of extraordinary geysers in the Upper Geyser Basin sets it apart from any other place on Earth. Better than 25% of the world's geysers are found within this area of 1 square mile. These are but a few of the over 100 geysers of the Upper Basin. There are also hundreds of bubbling and boiling hot springs along the trails. Morning Glory Pool is a beautiful sight, but it's a tragic scene as well. Some visitors, unaware of how fragile these natural wonders are, throw coins, trash, and other objects into the pools, choking off part of the flow of hot water. This has cooled the water temperature, allowing bacteria and algae to grow. Though still beautiful, we've been deprived of its true beauty by the thoughtless acts of others. Beautiful terraces of Mammoth Hot Springs are quite different from the features of the geyser basins. Water doesn't erupt here, it flows, gently from cracks in the surface, forming huge travertine terraces. Travertine is dissolved from the limestone and deposited at a much faster rate than the silica found elsewhere in the park. These waters carry nearly 2 tons of dissolved minerals to the surface each day. The source of this water comes from rain and snow falling high on the Yellowstone Plateau and Gallatin Mountains. Rainwater seeps into the underlying rocks. Rising hot gases mix with the water to form an acidic solution that dissolves the underlying limestone. The lime-saturated water continues to seep along rock layers until it reaches the surface, where it loses carbon dioxide, reducing its acid level. The limestone is no longer able to remain in solution and is deposited to form the terraces we see today. Travertine is deposited as a white material. The variety of colors come from tiny living bacteria or algae. A shift in activity may cause a spring to dry up, killing off the tiny organism. Hot water is the life of these springs. Without it, formations turn gray and begin to crumble. Throughout Yellowstone, wherever hot water flows, thermal bacteria and algae thrive. Their colors depend on a number of factors. Different color bacteria and algae live at different water temperatures, each adding a different hue to the landscape. In the hottest waters, the white of barren minerals are evident, along with light yellows and pinks. As water temperature cools, colors darken and intensify. In waters with a high acid level, greens are common. Another fascinating feature of Yellowstone are fumaroles. These are the simplest and hottest of thermal features. So little water enters their system that it instantly boils away. Only steam and hot gases reach the surface. Closely related are mud pots. These are fumaroles that have been drowned by surface water or their own condensed steam. Thermal bacteria in the water consume sulfur from the rising gases to form a solution of sulfuric acid. This dissolves the rocks and soils lining the crater, forming a thick pool of fine mud with steam and gases bursting through it. During periods of heavy rain, the mud pots can go through a series of changes. If your visit is during spring or early summer, they may have a more slurry appearance. As the sun and heat of summer evaporates the surface water, the mud thickens. Still others have lost their surface water completely.
Next on Wild Discovery.
Throughout the region. Most lie within the caldera we explored earlier. The largest concentration is here along the Firehole River. Most are easily accessible along the Loop Road, but others lie in Yellowstone's immense backcountry. The best place to begin your understanding of the geyser basins is at the Old Faithful area of the Upper Basin. Here, park rangers in the visitor center provide visitors with a wealth of information on thermal features. Eruption times for many of the predictable geysers are posted, and rangers are available to answer questions. Visitors are able to choose from a variety of ranger-led activities which change seasonally. As in all the major basins, boardwalks provide safe access to most of the important features. Staying on them is essential for the protection of the park's fragile features and to ensure your own safety. Black Sand Basin is part of the Upper Basin and lies on the edge of Iron Spring Creek. The most noted geyser here is Cliff Geyser, named for its cliff-like wall that borders Iron Spring Creek. Eruptions are common, but unpredictable. There are a number of colorful hot springs here. The rich colors of Emerald Pool are due to a combination of yellow-orange bacteria and the refraction of blue from its waters. Sunset Lake is a large hot spring. On rare occasions, it's been known to erupt to heights of 8 feet. Nearby Rainbow Pool is characterized by the beautiful rainbow-like colors that surround its crater. To the north of Black Sand, and still within the Upper Basin, is Biscuit Basin. The basin features a number of interesting springs and geysers. Many elements affect the springs and geysers of Yellowstone, but no single event has had such a profound effect as the earthquake of 1959. It registered 7.5 on the Richter scale and violently shook the Yellowstone region. Hot springs erupted into geysers. Hundreds of geysers erupted simultaneously to heights never seen before or since. Plumbing systems of many thermal features were radically changed. A day after the shocks, Sapphire Pool filled with muddy water. Weeks later, it erupted with some of the most powerful eruptions Yellowstone has ever seen, and continued erupting for years. Midway Geyser Basin lies just to the north of Upper Geyser Basin. Midway is a small cluster of springs and geysers along the Firehole River, but it contains two of the largest thermal features in the world. On a cool morning, their huge steam clouds dominate the view. The warm sun of a summer afternoon reveals the two giants. Excelsior Geyser, when it was active, was the largest geyser in the world. Grand Prismatic Spring is the largest hot spring in North America. From the air, its algae and bacteria-colored runoff channels radiate from its blue-green pool. Walking the boardwalk, you're surrounded with color. Adjacent to Grand Prismatic Spring is the giant crater of Excelsior Geyser. In 1888, early visitors witnessed a gigantic eruption of Excelsior. Estimates put the eruption at 300 feet high and 300 feet across. Its last known eruption, after 95 years of quiet, occurred in 1985. Excelsior now boils in a number of locations within its crater, indicating that powerful past eruptions may have blown apart its main plumbing system. It also has a tremendous water source. More than 4,000 gallons per minute flow from its crater. Close to 6 million gallons a day flows into the Firehole River through its beautiful runoff channels. The Lower Geyser Basin is the largest in Yellowstone, covering more than 12 square miles. There's a large variety of thermal features in this area. One of the most beautiful is Great Fountain Geyser. Its immense geyserite platform is impressive even when it's not erupting. Its 16-foot wide crater slowly fills with water and begins to overflow about 1 hour prior to an eruption. Boiling in the pool intensifies, and small surges indicate the eruption is near. The pool becomes quiet. Suddenly, water explodes into the sky. For the next 50 to 60 minutes, Great Fountain puts on a show that's one of the best in all of Yellowstone. Most bursts reach heights of 50 feet, with some reaching more than 150 feet. An occasional superburst can reach heights of 200 feet. Nearby is White Dome Geyser. Its intervals are very irregular. Over the years, mineral deposits have restricted its vent to just a few inches wide, resulting in a narrow jet of water. Pink Cone Geyser sits on the edge of Firehole Lake Drive. The perfectly shaped cone gets its color not from bacteria, but from various minerals. Pink Cone's activity increased greatly after the '59 earthquake. Previously, it had intervals as long as 50 hours. Immediately after the quake, intervals were less than 50 minutes. Over the years, its intervals have slowly increased again to around 16 hours or more, with eruptions lasting 2 to 2.5 hours. Next, we enter one of the most fascinating areas in all of Yellowstone, the fountain paint pots. This area was also affected by the '59 quake. Activity increased here so much that a boardwalk and parking lot had to be removed to accommodate the expansion. Fountain Geyser, for which the area is named, plays often, but due to its connection with a number of other geysers in the area, its intervals are difficult to predict. On a warm summer afternoon, the fountain displays the characteristics of a classic fountain-type geyser. If your visit is on a cool morning, the water display is obscured by billowing steam clouds. Jet geyser is closely related to fountain. Jet is likely to have several eruptions during fountain's duration. Water is jetted from at least 6 different vents, the central burst reaching heights of 20 feet. Clepsydra Geyser is named for a mythical Greek water clock. For years during the 1800s, it erupted at intervals of almost exactly 3 minutes. After the '59 earthquake, Clepsydra entered what's referred to as a wild phase, erupting almost continuously. Through the years since, it cycled chaotically in and out of wild phases. A number of geyser basins lie within Yellowstone's immense backcountry. These are quieter areas off the beaten track. Some require overnight trips to visit. Others can be reached by short hikes. Lone Star is a pleasant and popular 3-mile hike up the Firehole River. This is one of the largest cones in Yellowstone, rising to around 10 feet in height. Eruptions occur about every 3 hours, reaching heights of 30 to 45 feet. During the latter part of play, water gives way to a steam phase. Rangers lead hikes into this isolated area during the summer months. There are no developed walkways here, and the terrain can be extremely fragile and dangerous. Most of this area lies within an oval valley that formed during a large hydrothermal explosion about 10,000 years ago. Energy released during this steam explosion was equivalent to thousands of tons of TNT. One of the most intriguing thermal features is Mound Geyser. Eruptions consist of a series of heavy surges. Near Gibbon Meadows, a more strenuous trail takes you high above the valley floor. Monument Geyser Basin is a small collection of uniquely shaped features.
Coming up, the vast variety of geysers and their power. Next on Wild Discovery.
End of Gibbon Meadows, a pleasant hike leads to artists' paint pots. The trail is well maintained and passes a number of small and colorful springs. The paint pots themselves sit on top of a small hill, isolated from the other springs of the area. Further to the north is Norris Geyser Basin, named for an early park superintendent. In comparison, the landscape here is stark, quite different from the geyserite-covered areas of the Old Faithful region. One of the differences is the presence of acidic water. This is unusual in a geyser basin and gives Norris a unique appearance. Water temperatures are much higher here and geyser activity more vigorous. Areas of the surface here pulsate from the pressure of steam and boiling water beneath it. Norris is the oldest of Yellowstone's geyser basins. Except for the time buried during the Ice Age, hot springs have flowed here for more than 100,000 years. Norris is divided into 2 separate sections. The back basin is characterized by its forest-like setting. Porcelain Basin is barren, almost totally devoid of plant life. The milky coloration of the pools here is due to a saturation of opalescent silica and clay minerals. The scene before you is in a state of constant change. Steam explosions create new springs. Some may last weeks or longer, others only a few hours. Some of the larger geysers have survived over the years, but are never quite the same from one year to the next. After years of being dormant, Whirligig Geyser became active again in the summer of 1974. This geyser is probably more captivating for the sound it makes. Listen as the vents play out. In Back Basin, beautiful Emerald Spring combines the blue of its clear water with the yellow of its sulfur-coated bottom. Its temperature is usually within 5 degrees of boiling. This is the tallest geyser in the world when active. Steamboat's unpredictable eruptions can expel great amounts of water to almost unbelievable heights. Some eruptions are more than 3 times the size of Old Faithful. Steamboat was almost non-existent prior to 1878, when its first known major eruption occurred. The surrounding area reflects its destructive power. The star attraction at Norris is a Echinus geyser. Shown here in time-lapse, its pool slowly fills with water during its typical 35 to 70-minute interval as it prepares for the next eruption. You look down on Echinus from a spectacular vantage point. Nowhere else can you get this view from above such a large geyser. Soon the pool begins to boil violently. Bursts of steam and water begin to explode. Each burst is different. Some shoot straight up into the air, others are angled. Some reach heights of 100 feet. Eruptions typically last from 6 to 15 minutes, but can last for 60 minutes or longer. There is an extraordinary variety of geysers in the Back Basin, and like the rest of Yellowstone, they're constantly changing. The Mud Volcano area is a small but fascinating destination on the east side of the park. At the time of its discovery, Mud Volcano could be heard a mile away, and the ground around it shook. Today it's much smaller, but its energetic bubbling suggests a bridled power below. Dragon's Mouth is a turbulent hot spring in a cave-like setting. Water sloshes back and forth like waves breaking on a beach. One of the most interesting features in the area is Black Dragon's Cauldron. It was created in 1948 in a violent explosion that blew trees out by their roots and covered the nearby forest with mud. Since its discovery, it shifted 200 feet from its original location. The water supply here is limited and there's little runoff, creating a mass of seething black mud. Churning Cauldron is not boiling hot as it may appear, but rather its waters churn from escaping carbon dioxide gases. Nearby Sizzling Basin is a small collection of pools that merely bubble with these gases. Sulfur Cauldron gets its name from the abundance of sulfur in its scalding, frothing waters. West Thumb, located on the shores of Yellowstone Lake, is one of the most picturesque geyser basins in all of Yellowstone. This is but a small collection of springs and geysers, yet it offers visitors one of the most scenic walks anywhere. The main portion of thermal activity lies in an area less than 1,000 feet long and extends inland only a few hundred feet from the shores of Yellowstone Lake. For reasons unknown, West Thumb underwent a drastic decline in water levels in the 1970s, and activity here temporarily decreased. The largest geyser here is Twin. It's had periods of activity where eruptions reached heights of 100 feet, but for most of its recorded history, it's been dormant. West Thumb is probably more noted for its beautiful hot springs and for the beauty and color of their runoff channels. Most pools, like Lakeside Spring, overflow their heated water almost directly into Yellowstone Lake. Probably the most famous feature here is Fishing Cone. In the early days of the park, fishermen were said to have cooked their fish while still on the hook. In the early summer, when the lake's water level is at its highest, Fishing Cone may be completely underwater.
Coming up, the
Had been the scene of many changes over the years. Their future is uncertain, unpredictable. For within the very origin of this serene landscape lies the potential for volcanic activity unparalleled in modern times. Another major earthquake in the region could forever change that which has become so familiar. And change, like the seasons, is certain. The winter of 1992 saw witness to this certainty. Without notice, thermal activity shifted at West Thumb. Water levels in many of the springs dropped drastically. Where beautiful Ephedra Spring once overflowed with water, now lies an almost barren depression. Twin Geyser lies drained and powerless. Water and heat has shifted. In their place, Abyss Pool has become superheated. From the depths of this once calm pool, a geyser has come to life. Considering all we know about the geyser basins of Yellowstone, they remain a fantastic paradox, an amazing contrast of stability and change. Geysers are complex, yet their simple beauty requires no explanation. The basins change constantly, but year after year, visitors return to find them much the same. Yet seemingly little has changed. Even as winter throws an icy blanket of silence over Yellowstone, the roar of a defiant old faithful is still one of the most reverent experiences that a person can behold. Maybe it was a moment such as this that inspired novelist Thomas Wolfe to write, "It is the one place where miracles not only happen, but where they happen all the time."